It looks like we got some good news for Pokemon fans. Apparently, at least in one region, the sales are down 40%. That is, in the UK at least, physical sales. I'm not sure um, if the digital is going to be that much difference. Um, we don't have that data. We can suspect or, assume, but I'm not going to do that. What it does show me, though, is that the cracks might be starting to form. One of the things that Ubisoft had problems with over time was they kept on hitting bad game after bad game after bad game after bad game until no matter what they released, they weren't having successful games. Even Assassin's Creed could not save them, even though it wasn't really successful and also it wasn't really successful either. So that did not save them at all. But it took them time to get to that point. It was slow at the beginning, and as it got towards the end, it became quicker. Pokemon right now, you're starting to see cracks form within the fan base. People who are defending Legends EA because they enjoy it, which I'm going to tell you this right now. You need to accept that it's okay to like bad games. The game you see on screen right now is in fact what some people, actually a lot of people that I see comment on it, outside of the Final Fantasy fan base that is a bad game. Because it's the very first Final Fantasy game. This is the Pixel Remaster version. I personally think it's a really nice, cozy game. Really fun, short JRPG that you can beat even prior to the update that gave you where you could adjust how much experience you get, how much money you get, reducing some of the farming from that by I think up to 4 times for those. I think you could also turn off random encounters. I ended up beating all or getting all achievements on this game in I believe it was about 22 or 23 hours. So now it's probably going to be a lot less. Probably sub 20 or maybe even sub 15. Probably for my next playthrough. I might do one just to see how quick it is now. But that's beside the point. A lot of people consider it to be bad. I consider it to be one of the best games for the experience that it gives. It's a simple. Story's not amazing. The gameplay is what a lot of people consider to be basic, but it's very simple, cozy. And it's, in my opinion, a nice short 8 JRPG that I don't have to invest 100 plus hours into. So, we just have difference of opinions here. I accept that people may say this is a bad game. Does it bother me or stop me from enjoying it? No. It shouldn't stop you from enjoying Pokemon Legends Z8 either. What I want as a fan of Pokemon, someone who's been playing on and off since Game Boy when I was playing, like my Christmas, when I got, what was it? I believe I got 2 copies of Pokemon Red for Christmas to go and be able to play on my GBA. Or not GBA, my Game Boy. And I was happy. And I was even happier when one of the, because, like one of them that got it was my aunt and the other one was one of my uncles. And one of them ended up taking it back and getting me Pokemon Yellow. So now I had Red and Yellow. So it's just a lot of fun that I had playing those games. Eventually got Pokemon Gold. Eventually got Pokemon Crystal. I got Pokemon, was it Ruby? And then eventually got Sapphire. Had Fire Red. There's just, I've been playing them for so long. And I really, really like the potential that Pokemon has. So when I see ZA, I'm like, what are you doing? Okay, so what? Your budget was 13 million? Palworld's budget was 10 million up to the release of their early access in the beginning of 2024. They probably spent like another 10 plus million dollars probably on this. So, maybe their final budget by the time it releases from early access next year might be like 20-30 million dollars. And that is a pretty good budget value for a game that is successful. Pokemon, they have the IP and recipe to consistently sell 20, 30 million copies or more, they should at least have a budget between 30 and 50 million. They should take the time necessary to flesh out the problems that their game have. You know, each one of them seems to have their own little problem. And that's the thing. I want to see better from them. Because, you know, think about it. How old are you? You know, people in their 20s and 30s, they probably think, oh, okay, I got, maybe not the 30s, you know, it depends on the person. But if you're in your teens, your 20s, maybe your early 30s, you're thinking, oh, I got plenty of time. You know, I'm not really thinking about growing older. But if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s potentially, you realize your time is finite. You can't get time back. Where you can earn more money, you can't get more time. And that's a problem that, you know, a lot of people don't really think about. They want to get the best quality game for one of their favorite, or maybe even their favorite, not one of, but the one that's at the top, you know, franchise. Pokemon is the number one IP in the world. Number one. So there's a lot of people who really love the world and the lore that they've built up over the various media and, you know, merchandise over the years. So they want to see the best. Where Game Freak has been failing. And if they continue to fail, they will eventually start to be treated like Ubisoft, where they're not going to go out of business, because some people think, oh, you just want them to go bankrupt or some crap like that. No, they're not going to go out of business. They're the number one IP in the world. They have so many companies and investors. Even if they burn through all the money in their company, someone will bail them out, because they're that big. They're that massive. Their IP has so much potential. So what ends up happening is you will start to see them go down and sell less, and then investors will start to be like, what the heck is going on? You know, things might change. Or the worst case is that they don't change and say, well, we still make profit. You know, we don't care. And they continue to stick their head in the sand. That's the worst case scenario. But I am definitely happy to see that I'm not the only one who thinks they could do better. And if this continues to go down that route, where they continue to make mistakes, their next game might even sell less copies. And if their game just, you know, stagnates again for the game after that, it could sell less. It's not a, you know, one failure and they're bankrupt. That's not how this works. The reason why these big companies hardly ever fail is because a lot of the times when they start to see, oh, this ain't working, so they pivot to something that does work. That takes time to pivot. It takes time for them to get to that point. But they eventually fix it. How many, look at the period of time where EA was considered the worst company in the world multiple times, like back-to-back years. And then they started pivoting and started doing stuff that gamers really liked. And then they're like, oh, EA is back to being good again. And then they started going downhill again and started doing more crap that people didn't like. Now they're the worst company in the world again. It's like an ebb and flow. It's like a balancing act. And right now, in my opinion, and based on what we're seeing currently with these preliminary results, Pokemon might finally be starting to see cracks. If they go from selling like 20 to 25 million copies for their Pokemon games, and this sells like 10 million, 15 million, or maybe even less, then that means that they're going to look at that and say, okay, we sold 10 million less copies than what we're expecting. that means we're missing out on an additional, like what is the price, like $70? So $700 million in revenue minus all the fees and stuff. That would get subtracted off of that. But so basically, they're missing like $500 million worth of extra revenue that they could have got. That's a lot of money to leave off the table. Is it really worth not investing 10 to 20 million more dollars into their stuff when it costs them hundreds of millions more in potential sales by making inferior games? That's what you got to think about. People don't think that, they do this because they can get away with it. Well, what if they can't get away with it anymore? Or the amount of money that they end up losing by selling less copies, they start to think, we need to invest more. We need to make sure the quality of our game is better. And honestly, you want my opinion? They should follow Mario's route. Have your older style Pokemon games that are reminiscent of the Nintendo DS era or, Game Boy Advance era, like how that style of Pokemon works. And then also have your 3D versions of Pokemon. So one's a 2D, next one's a 3D. 2D, 3D, 2D, 3D. And that way, you can have the team that specializes and is good at making 2D stuff, continue to make that. And the ones that are great at making 3D games could, start working on the 3D games and maybe bring some people over to work on the 3D stuff and flesh that out more. And then over time, they'll start to make better and more consistently good games like Nintendo does. Another thing that they should do, look at more spin-off games. In my opinion, one of the best games in the Pokemon franchise is not even the main game. Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2. Really solid. Why is that? Because it combines combat and a bunch of fun mini-games. Or here's a freaking concept. Why don't we have a Pokemon party? Board games and with a whole bunch of your favorite Pokemon that you can play and do the mini games with. Or maybe you're the trainer. There's different ways you can pull it off. But yeah, a Pokemon party would probably do really well. A Pokemon kart style game could probably do really well for a spin-off game. But they probably don't want to do that because they think it would take away sales from Mario Kart and Mario Party, which may or may not be true. There can be two. What if people get sick of Pokemon, or not Pokemon, Mario Kart, they want to play something else? Pokemon Kart could be something that would be really fun. Or a Mario, or a Pokemon Party could be something that could be really fun, to play once you get kind of bored of playing Mario Party. But they don't do that. They just stick to the same formula and don't want to expand. And a lot of companies, big companies, make the mistakes and don't continue to produce spin-off games. One of the strongest reasons, in my opinion, for Nintendo's success is you have a ton of different spin-off games for some of their popular IP. So if you look at Mario, for example, you have 2D platforming, 3D platforming, you have the kart, sports, party, RPGs. I'm probably missing some. Oh, their little haunted one with like the Luigi's Mansion style games. So yeah, there's at least like 8 different types of genres that they have for you to play. Pokemon could probably get a similar number of different genres that they could be making games for. So if they were to expand and bring out a Pokemon like mansion type game, or Pokemon Kart, Pokemon Party, Pokemon Sports, all these different types of games, I think their IP would be more fleshed out, more successful, and sell an insane amount. They would be making a lot more profit by doing this, because they'd have more games that they can sell, and people love Pokemon and IP. And if you brought out consistently good games for all these different types of genres, I think you'd be selling an insane amount of more games. Yes, it would require more investment, but the amount of potential extra revenue would be a heck of a lot more. But that's beside the point. So yeah, when I complain And when I criticize Pokemon, it's not that I want to see them fail. It's I want to see them succeed. Because when they make good Pokemon games or great Pokemon games or a masterpiece, which in my opinion there has never been a Pokemon masterpiece yet, not on the same level as, like a Chrono Trigger or Elden Ring or Baldur's Gate 3, one of those type of games. Pokemon, for being the biggest IP, has never had one of those. In my opinion, they haven't even come close to a masterpiece yet. But if they did, I would be happy for it. I wouldn't be upset that, because people say that people criticize their grifters. No. Some are. Some don't play Pokemon. And some haven't had a reason to play Pokemon, and they're just sick of seeing bad Pokemon. Like, to be honest, I would not blame people for not playing Pokemon over the last 10 years. It's like, oh, you don't even play Pokemon. It's like, well, that's not really a criticism or a valid reason for them not to criticize Pokemon. Pokemon has gone out of the way to make it so that none of their games over, the last 10 years, except for Arceus, which some people might have missed or just didn't really want to play that game because they want to see Pokemon do better, or they just missed out on it and they don't really want to go back and play older games, because there are people like that. Yeah, honestly, I'm just gonna say this: Pokemon can do better, and once they stop making these average to mediocre or even bad games, I will praise them for it. Just like I praise them for Pokemon Legends of Arceus being a really good game. I got a solid 80 hours out of it. I'm going to tell you right now, how a lot of people say, oh, you can never experience games again like you did when you were younger or a kid. And I said bull crap to that. And you want to know what ended up happening? Pokemon Legends of Arceus was one of the first games of this decade that I felt like, oh my god, this is so much fun. Holy crap. And I put 80 hours in, caught all the Pokemon. There is one bad aspect to Pokemon Arceus, and that was the fact that the boss battles against a lot of these noble Pokemon and whatnot with throwing powder balls, dude, just do what you did with Giratina, man. Where it had multiple phases, and, I had to use my team against it, and, it's very tough, very challenging boss. I would have preferred that over just dodging, you wanted it to have a mixture of turn-based and, action-based combat, and I'm like, no, dude, just get rid of the action, get rid of me having to, dodge, and I can't use my Pokemon. I want to be able to use my Pokemon. That would have been a heck of a lot more enjoyable boss battles if they were to give me more fights like they did with Giratina after you beat I can't remember his, basically the Cynthia knockoff. So yeah, honestly, that's my personal opinion. I hope they do better going forward. I hope they start making more I'm just say good or better Pokemon games. I still don't expect them to. That's why I said I hope. But if they continue to see cracks like this and their next Pokemon game is not as well received, or if, because there's also the possibility that was only one region where the sales were bad. Maybe all the other regions, their sales exceeded expectations or exceeded the previous numbers. That's a possibility. So, I'm going to take the wait and see approach, see how ZA ends up being. But if it ends up being less successful, if that 40% sales is across the board, across all the regions, averaging out to 40% less sales, and they go from 20 million sales to what would be 40%? So it'd be 4 million for every 10 million. So that would be 8 million less sales. So it'd be 12 million. 12 to if it's above 20 million less sales. Because I'm not sure how many. I think Scarlet and Violet had 22, 23 million sales last I checked. So it'd probably be between 12 and 15 million sales if it stayed the course at the 40% less sales on average across the board. But yeah, If that ends up being the case, then maybe we see change. If not, if their next game sells less, like starts selling less than ZA, and then the game after that sells less, we could eventually see change. I don't expect it anytime soon. When I say we're starting to see the cracks, it would probably take 5 to 10 years before it would get bad enough to where Pokemon would be forced to change or just continue to make less and less money, which from what I understand is still profitable probably, even if they were to sell like 50% less than the previous one, because they only apparently needed to sell like 300,000 copies in order to break even. That's because their budget was real low. But I think they would prefer to sell 10 million more copies of a game, working hard, investing a little bit more, bring it from 13 million to like 30 million. Heck, even if they brought it up to a $50 million budget, if they sell 10 million more copies, even if you cut it in half on how much they actually receive, that's 350 million more dollars. So spending an extra like 37 million more, they get basically almost 10 times that amount of money back. I think it would probably be a pretty good investment, especially if their sales start to go down significantly. Anywho, I'm repeating myself. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.